Hi, folks. Good evening. We're all getting loaded up here, folks. We'll get in here. Hi, Anne Marie. Hi, Karen, Bob.
Greetings.
Hi, Marcus.
How we doing out there? Doing terrific. It's a strange.
I'm
Go
going to
ahead.
turn off my video because I'm eating. So
No problem. I completely understand. You got it. So we got that. I see our friends on Flag Drive. Good evening. And Tanya, I'm just kind of letting everybody load in here, folks. We'll get started in just a minute. As always, we are recording this so we can share it to others. We did have about 10 RSVPs, so we'll see how many folks that we get.
good.
Jasper, if we could just, if everybody would mute out, I'm getting a little feedback. So if you're not speaking, maybe just put on mute. All right, perfect. So let's see. I'm just going to look again and see if we have everybody. Molly, if you don't mind, just because we've got a few minutes, we've got 4 or 5 of us here. I know there's a few more, but you want to make a couple of introductions. So maybe go ahead and do that.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. ELAC, I wanted to introduce you to one of our newest housing developers, Tanya Jimenez. I couldn't quite remember when she started relative to when our last meeting was, but she's been working almost exclusively on Willoughby Corner with us and moved back to Colorado from Seattle. So we're really happy to have her here. And yeah, she's up to speed. So if you have any questions, I'll put her on the spot later.
Excellent. That's a great idea. We'll just put her right on the spot. So I think that works out fine. So, all right, friends, it looks like we're getting kind of loaded up here with most of our attendees. Hi, Evie. It looks like you're getting your sound all set up. Thanks very much for joining us. So folks, I just want to check in a little bit and go through our agenda. We've got probably, 20 or 30 slides like is normal, but you all know, I mean, you can unmute yourself and just raise your hand. You don't need to raise your hand, just interrupt and say, ask me a clarifying question. We just want to catch up. It's so great to kind of catch up with this group. We know that there has been a little bit of an extended delay before we go to City Council, and we are scheduled for City Council on October 20th, which is next Thursday. All of you know that is not a normal date for City Council. This is a special meeting that they are hosting on Thursday, 10/20. So notice has been sent out to our expanded footprint, and we'll go through the other things that are being discussed that night besides just the PUD and why that has been extended to this date. So here's our agenda. We'll go through introductions. I think we have most of our folks on. I think we all know each other. So I can see that. We'll go through that. We'll talk about the PUD in some detail. We'll talk about these other agreements that are before the city on the night of, right? So we can talk a little bit about what else we're presenting and actually what has led to this delay to get those documents finalized. And then we'll show you some cool and great new conceptual architecture or conceptual renderings for the site and talk about the overall timeline. So with that, I'm just going to jump in if that's okay. If anybody wants to start with any questions, go right ahead. Otherwise, I'll probably just jump right into the material. Go ahead, Jasper. Next slide.
I have a question before you start.
Please, Karen, go right ahead.
Because of what you said you sent out notifications for that council meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, whatever the standard process is, the city has done the notice. Yes.
The city has done it.
Yes.
And so it's not as large a mailing as you normally have been doing?
Yeah. So you know what, Karen, I want to be careful here so I don't get myself, you know what, I will see, and let me confirm this, okay? We have been postponed, Karen, right? Since this was originally noticed. And we have been postponed because they are working on finalizing the other agreements, right? It has nothing to do with PUD. So Karen, I am guessing, and I'm sorry to do that, that the original notice stands and then they continue to post updates on when the hearing will be. So let me just check that, okay? And then I'll get back to you. But yes, they are following all noticing protocol, but I wonder if because the dates have just been postponed rather than delayed, if everyone has been re-noticed. So let me check on that, okay?
Okay, because I didn't get a notice the last time, I guess when you were at Planning Commission. And I don't know what happened there. And so I'm just, if they're going by the standard notification range, not many people are going to get notified. So it's.
And I do know that, Karen, we provide the database, right? For them, we kind of give them the footprints. And I know that has not changed. That's that expanded footprint. But Karen,
Okay.
I'm going to owe you that. I know you and I can both check on it, but let me check on that and I'll get back to you as well.
Great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Very good question. All right. So we'll go through this, folks. You know how. Raise your hand or just ask a question. We want to give you some great Willoughby Corner updates tonight. There is some new material walking through some updates on the PUD and then the architecture. Next slide, Jasper. So I know everybody understands this. I just want to go back through. We did the sketch PUD together, right? We all went through that process, the sketch plan, as we called it then. And then we're going through the preliminary and final PUD. So we're going through this process right now. We have already done, as you recall, the rezoning. We separated that out. So we had our rezoning in place so we could work on our financing. We talked about that with ELAC and that was approved. So we are just taking the final PUD and these other agreements to City Council. Additionally, after this step and actually concurrently, we will go through these other processes. The subdivision and infrastructure, we have actually made a submittal on our site plan for phase 1. And then of course, we'll go through the vertical construction steps. So those are ongoing, but we really are in that yellow box, the final PUD. Next slide, Jasper. So I'm going to have Molly kind of run through these questions or through these updates on the PUD. Folks, we're going to go, there's some new material here, but we want to be sure and show you just kind of the overall content of the PUD and talk about that. So Molly, you go ahead and take these next few slides. Go ahead, please.
Sure, thanks. And this is actually a lot of really material that you've seen a couple of times now, these next couple of slides. So it's a little bit more of a review than a new presentation. And I believe you've had the actual PUD submittal. It hasn't changed since early this summer, except for, I think we relabeled it final. But as you know, it's our overriding goals for everything is to make 100% affordable homes and some pretty substantial amenities on the sites for, walkable, pedestrian-oriented development. We have a community center and public transportation. All of these have been accommodated and are kind of outlined in PUD. It's just the skeleton of what our development will be. We really did prioritize the pedestrian experience, and a lot of the modifications that we made to the code are really just adjustments from what was Lafayette's code is from the 1980s, which was really conducive to single family, large acreage, single family development. And so we really wanted to do something different with ours. So next slide, please. Again, we have really lengthy text that gets into the meat of how we go about achieving those goals. I think you've had all this material, so I really don't want to spend too much time on it, but we get into everything, including parking, the metrics of pedestrian and vehicular access. We get into details about our goals on how we're going to provide multimodal transportation. And then we really get into the design, sizing, the specifications of lighting, and what we wanted to do with our landscaping and irrigation strategies. Next slide, please. Again, this is nothing has changed since the last time you saw this, but our site plan our Willoughby Corner is subdivided up into a couple of planning areas, and each of these planning areas are defined in the PUD for topics like how dense they can be, how much parking is in each one. And then all of these together, you know, kind of make the patchwork of Willoughby Corner. Also shown on the PUD are outlots, which just refers to anything that is, you know, doesn't have residential development on it. Anne-Marie, I see you have your hand up.
Hi, where are the for sale, which are the for sale units? Are they the townhomes or the duplexes? I can't remember. And where will they be?
Sure, it's some of each. So it's all of the A sections on the perimeter, north and east perimeters, and then many of the B townhomes. So the for sale will have 2 product types.
And do you have a partner on the for sale, or is BCHA going to be building the for sale? I know that's not typically what you do. So have you figured somebody out to partner with on the for sale?
No, not yet. It's on our, we have so much going on with these first phases right now. It's like next on our to-do list to look at other models that are in the area. But we don't have any partners selected. Pretty open-minded at this point. And Evie, I see you have your hand up too.
Because I'm in real estate, in fact, I just came from a permanently affordable housing a home this afternoon that I'm going to list in Boulder. And I've been doing it for 16 years. So I've seen different builders. So I'd be curious to see which builder is and how. So my question really is, how are you going to identify which builder?
Yeah, sure. So we have, well, my first step will be doing a bunch of research, probably reaching out to you now that you've mentioned you know some.
I'd be happy to talk to you about which ones I think are better than others.
Okay, yeah. So we would do some research. We would see what fits best for, you know, what works well with our tax credit partnerships, what works for the overall ownership of the site, and then we'll have to go out to a public RFP. So we would write an RFP and
I have a dog that's bugging me right now. So, but yeah, anyway, she's trying to get my attention. Oh, so she's distracting. But okay, I'll look forward to hearing about how you pick a builder.
Sure. Yeah.
When you go out for an RFP, you'll be going to both for-profit and nonprofit builders like Thistle and Habitat, as well as private developers.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think Anne Marie and Evie, this is Marcus. We work with a group in Denver. Elevation has done that. That's a nonprofit side. So I think we'd go to both nonprofit and for-profit. We probably have to write kind of the scope of that. So that's why we do all that research on it. But we're looking at a couple of models, but you both know it so well. We'd love any feedback that you all have. Go ahead
Yeah,
and go.
phase 2 and 3 are right there. They'll be here before we know it too. And this PUD covers all phases, so it's a little bit generic in some ways, and some of these specific things don't get covered in this document, even though we've thought through them. Next slide, please. Again, I don't think this is new information, but we did a lot of work with the city to make sure that each planning unit or each planning area had an appropriate density. That was a lot based on the sketch plan that this group came up with before my time. And then we have committed to sort of a land dedication, which is all of the public areas will kind of count towards our commitment to the city to provide amenities on the neighborhood site. Next slide, please. Again, just a pretty diagrammatic. I mean, we're deep into the engineering now, but this is our overall framework for the types of really vehicular access. And I think what's important to notice is that we've pulled most of the main vehicular traffic out to the periphery and really tried to preserve some of the park areas and really prioritize pedestrian. Next slide, please. This image is just a little bit more colorful to kind of start to give you characterizations of what the landscaping will be like. There's quite a bit of open space and community gathering areas. There's orchards and a dog park, community gardens. We've been talking about this the whole time. We now officially have community gardens that are dedicated to our senior building, and some other community gardens that will be great open to the multifamily units. Next slide. One of our goals with this project was to really reduce the amount of irrigation that would be required. This is sort of the way of the world. This is BCHA's goal, and certainly this project has become one of the leaders, at least in our portfolio, in terms of low water use. So in that storm drainage pond over on the eastern side, that red area doesn't require any irrigation. The very low, which is kind of that neon green color, some of those areas have a little bit of irrigation requirements, mostly to get trees established. And then where you see the darker, brighter green, that's where we'll have more long-term irrigation. There's a little bit of lawn near the playground, thinking that we'd want to, yep, right there. And actually this diagram should have changed. We've actually turned those bright green areas that are flanking Canterbury and Willoughby to low. So we've changed out the plant specifications there to get us back down. Anne Marie, another question?
My question is, I'm just curious what techniques you're using to keep the irrigation low. Are you using drought tolerant grasses? Are you using less green, less any kind of grass and more just leaving it? I mean, what is the, just curious, because I think lots of us need to know about this.
Yes, all of the above. So we have some other decorative materials that are like the big pebbles and that kind of thing that we're putting along the sides of the roads. It's less maintenance than lawn for a lot of our maintenance staff. But everything you said, we have drought tolerant plant specified. We had about, we were much farther along than these diagrams. We're into the actual specification of all plants, but I did mention a lot of the specifications that do require irrigation. I don't know the full duration, but it's not in perpetuity. It's just until the plants until the trees get established. So there's some that just sort of we'll stop irrigating them after, I don't know what it is, 3-8 years. We can find out more, but yeah, the strategy was to just really reduce the specification of plants that need water. Having said that, it's still an extremely lush site, and you'll see, we had Norris Design doing our landscape architecture. They put a ton of time into doing the selections, and our renderings that we can share with you kind of at the end show you the variety and the kind of robustness of the landscape that we were still able to do, even using low water species. I see Christy has a question too. Do you also plan for an organic non-Roundup type weed control? That's a good question. I believe in our current BCHA portfolios, we just weed. I don't believe that we use chemicals. I can confirm that, but I think that's a kind of BCHA, all of our properties take that stance. But yeah, that would be kind of on our maintenance and operations side. And then to kind of what Anne Marie brought up, we actually did specify hardy plants, and not just drought resistant, but ones that are naturally sturdy, I would say, without needing chemicals. Any other questions on the landscaping or irrigation?
Bob Megan here. My question from the Senior Advisory Board, talking about irrigation and water resources, will there be sufficient current and anticipated water resources for this entire development, not just the irrigation, but for the whole community? And what's the outlook for supporting the water needs of this entire development?
Yes, great question, Bob. So we had earlier this summer, we were able to acquire enough water rights for all 400 homes. And so we already have those in place when we, close on the building and kind of make it through all of our entitlements. Those water rights that are already in the city's possession are going to be dedicated for this property only. So we have an agreement, both BCHA and the county, that those water rights cannot be used for other development. It's only for Willoughby Corner. But yes, we did have enough for all 400 units and this irrigation as proposed. And we before we purchased the water, we really did our best efforts to reduce what we could in terms of irrigatable landscape. And that's why it's a little bit different than what we're showing, is we actually were able to pull it down even more.
Good. Thank you, Molly.
Okay, moving on, just to kind of let you know how all these entitlements documents pull together. The PUD gives the outline of a lot of the qualitative pieces and parts of our neighborhood, and the preliminary plat is the legal boundaries of each lot. So this, will allow us to, as you can see, the different lots around the perimeter. Those are the first for sale. We have, lot 165, 166, 167. Those ones kind of down below that are our planning areas E and F. That will contain many homes. And this is, the legal descriptions are part of how we are organizing this to be able to finance it. So we have to break this up into a couple of phases because we're chasing different funding for both, for all the different parts of our project. But this legal document is, the kind of standard subdivisionary plat that goes along with any development. Next slide. And then finally, our phasing plan. Again, this really has not changed quite a bit since the last time we spoke. But everything that is highlighted in red is what we are doing in our first site plan. So Marcus did mention we're running the review of our site plan kind of concurrently with this, and we are basically going for all of the infrastructure in the first phase. What we will be delivering to the community is the overall site infrastructure that includes grading, utilities, the roads, everything to get access and get these buildings up and running. And then our first phase 1A down at the bottom left is the 55 and plus community, and then phase 1B, which is ELAC K, ELAC I, and then planning areas C, D, and F, as well as ELAC J. Those are all part of our phase 1B, as well as, all of those outlots include, you can see on the right-hand side, a lot of the main park amenities. Christy, you see that hand up?
Yep, sorry. Quick question. I feel like I missed it when it looks like F phase 1B is gonna run right up to 120th.
Yeah,
And-
so what's kind of hard, that's unfortunate because the PUD is asking us for a lot of details that would be better represented with a more detailed drawing, which we have. I think even in the slideshow we have, we can show that to you. But because the PUD actually defines the amount of setbacks from the property line. So right where Jasper has his yellow arrow, that little kind of like dashed long dot line, we're required to pull the buildings to the east of that. And so no development is happening right up to the lot line, and that, if we do want to get into the nitty gritty of the PUD, we could examine that section and take a look at it.
And Molly, just for clarification, I think it's to the west of that line.
I'm sorry, to the west. Yep.
Okay.
So Christy,
Yeah,
I think we're acknowledging those kind of historic things that we talked about back in the sketch plan. So that doesn't stick out more. I think you're absolutely right.
Okay. Yeah, just like there used to be, the dog park was over there, and it felt like there was more
Yep.
space there before, and I'm not sure. It's hard to tell from the scale, but the poor people who live across the street are just gonna be like, what the heck happened? Now there's suddenly this 3-story thing in a neighborhood that had nothing before. So
Good.
I guess that was my concern with what is going on there. So
Let's see, Chrissy, I'm not but let's see if we have that addressed, if we have a good view of that in our images. But I think you're right. We have kind of a setback from that multi-trail, which you can see here, and then go from there. I mean, we do step up right away to 3 stories, but we'll show a rendering of that, Christy, and see if we can walk around the site.
okay.
So folks, I'll pick this up for a second. Just a couple other things here. This is just the engagement timeline. So it does feel like we've been working on this piece of it for a while. We started back with you all in last September. We've had the 2 neighborhood meetings. We did the one pre-Christmas or pre-holidays, and then second after the holidays, so we could have more people, which was such a good idea. So those are now, this is our 6th meeting. The PUD itself went to Planning Commission back on July 13th. So it has been this gap from July 13th to 10/20 to next week. The reason for that, again, is not related to the PUD. It's related to these other documents that we're taking to City Council. I do want to say, like, when you go to City Council, they have the hearing, right? Karen knows this so well. The hearing is on the PUD, but then there are other agenda items. So they won't necessarily have a hearing, but we want to address them all. So we'll probably include them in our presentation as well. Next slide, Jasper. So let's go into those. These are the development agreements. We wanted to give you an idea on the affordable housing plan, right, which is what we've all been talking about, and then vested rights. So these are the other documents that the city and BCHA have really been working to finalize before the meeting on the 20th. So the delays have been about these respective agreements and going through the process. So next slide, please. And then folks, we'll just briefly walk through this. Molly will go back to it, and then we have the rendering. So Molly, if you just want to talk about the underline kind of what's being contained in those documents.
Yeah, so this is just a reminder of what the 2017 intergovernment agreement was with City of Lafayette, Boulder County, and Boulder County Housing Authority. These are guiding principles that have not changed in 5 years now. Again, we are targeting, or we are providing all rentals below 60% area median income, and this basically translates to 320 rental apartments. So this has stayed the same. We were also committing to 10% of our neighborhood being age restricted for residents 55 years and older, which is, we're providing 63, which is a few more. The for sale that we were talking a moment ago about, those will be deed restricted for 120% AMI or less. And at Willoughby, this translates to 80 homes. So that's the percentages we were required. And we did have in this agreement some market rate potential, but we have made the commitment to do 100% affordable. Next slide, please. So what is happening now in layman's terms, because legalese can get kind of confusing, is we are superseding that original 2017 agreement for something that is much more specific and commits BCHA to certain things to the city. So basically this diagram, this chart here, is exactly what we're providing, which is kind of taking those bullet points from the previous slide and translating them into numbers. Our agreement, and this is something that will get recorded, goes over exactly how many low-income rentals, how many senior low-income rentals, and how many for sale affordable. And it goes through our requirements for compliance reporting. So every time somebody, we have a lot of compliance reporting. Anytime somebody kind of gives us something, we have to comply. So I think what the City of Lafayette has agreed to do with us is kind of use some of our other funding reporting from CHAFA, from the Department of Housing, and use that to demonstrate annually that we are complying with what we've promised to do. We are also going to, BCHA will take on the administration and management of our affordable units on behalf of the city. In the city's current community housing program, the city has been managing units, but this is sort of something that doesn't work as well for them and is much more efficient for BCHA to do, since that's our business. So we are just legally agreeing that we will manage these units and administer them. And what we get in return is a exemption from the residential growth management regulations in the city of Lafayette, which are set to, I can't remember exactly what it is, I think it's 1% growth each year. And the city many years ago decided, as part of their community affordable housing goals, would be to exempt developers who were providing permanently affordable units. So that's what the affordable housing agreement goes into. It's actually a fairly concise document, 5 pages long. It'll become public record, so you guys can all read it. And then to go along with that, we have proposed to the city to vest these rights. Basically, it's a resolution that promises us that we'll be able to develop, will be, according to the approved final PUD, which we're talking about now, for 10 years. And as you know, it's already taken 5 years for us to get to this point. So that's kind of just a formality that we put into place should, we need, who knows what happens in 10 years. There could be a change of board, there could be, a change of heart. BCHA hopes to complete this, all 400 units, as soon as possible. But these development projects, especially lower income housing tax credits, can just take years. Next slide.
Great.
Just ask a question. I
Yep.
apologize because I've missed some meetings, but why is it that we have, I'm not against it, I'm just puzzled. Why do we have market rate units in the development? Is that to help pay for
We
them?
don't. I think when that 2017 agreement was signed, there was no plan. There was no pro forma. There was no drawings showing how many units would fit. None of these things had been studied yet. And so that was a little potential in case BCHA, wanted to sell off a lot to make it a market rate. We did not end up doing that in this development. Now that we've gone through all the planning and funding, we didn't land there.
But the matrix showed 16 market rate.
So
That
we
spreadsheet.
aren't taking advantage of those 16, but within our commitment to the city, we were only obligated up until we still had that percentage. I think it is 20% available for market rate.
Well, but we are obligated to have 20% market rate.
Not obligated. No, maybe we could go back up to that.
Yeah, Jasper, can you go back up?
Yeah,
That's like, so it just says there are 16 market rate units. It's just that I thought the entire development was.
yeah.
affordable.
That's a good clarification. That we are allowed to do that by this agreement just because of the way the percentages work out, but we are not required to do that.
Yeah, I think Evie, what's happening here is you saw that underlying agreement, that original agreement we had with the city allowed for that. So the affordable housing agreement needs to go along with it. But we are not building those 16 units as market rate. We are making them all affordable. So the agreement would allow us to, that's probably just to allow that continued flexibility, but we're not planning to build any.
Mhm. At
Okay.
this time.
Mhm.
Exactly.
So if you are going to council with this as a housing plan and affordability agreement, and you don't plan on building the 16 market rate, why would you have that in that table? I guess at this point, I know it was in the original agreement, but now that you have a different configuration, shouldn't we revise this to not have that in there?
Yeah, Henry, I'll have to check on that.
So
I'm not sure. Yeah.
make so let us check on that. What I'm wondering, and let us check on it, Anne Marie and Evie, it's a great question. What I'm wondering, folks, is in our for sale, you see the for sale affordable units there. I'm wondering if it gives us a little flexibility on the for sale to be above the 80 to 100%
Yeah.
AM. So I think, guys, those 16 units are actually more about the for sale affordable definition, but this goes over the affordable AMI. Is that fair, Molly?
Yes, and I realized we had some guidance come out this week about income averaging, and I think we're now, I think we're trying to keep our options open in case income averaging for units became an option.
So
But let's check on that, yeah.
So let us check on it. So I think, folks, that's really more about the percentage of AMI, area median income, and because of Boulder County's very high area median. So we're making these affordable. I think it's about those percentages. So that's a great question. Let us get you a final answer on that. Why they're
Could we have a conversation about that, though? I mean, I'm not sure I disagree with it, but we've never really talked about that category, attainable housing, which you're talking about now. And the for sale, you know, over 80% AMI. And it may be that we as a group decide that's something we really support, but we've never talked about it. And it feels like we should probably have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
I like to say one thing about it, you know, in Boulder, they do have more than one category of income. You know, there are certain houses where you can make it 80,000 and other houses you can make 60,000, for instance. So it's kind of interesting that they do have different categories of.
Yeah.
So, and that said that on that sheet that there's both the 60% AMI and below and 80% AMI and below. But we've never really talked about above 80% because that's not generally in the definition of affordable. And I'm not against it. And it may be too late. You guys have to go forward and we don't have another meeting. So maybe, you know, I don't know what we can do about it, but.
So here's, yeah, Anne Marie, I think it's a good point. And I want to say, let's check on this. So just to be clear, BCHA and Molly certainly, but that's been that's a small group negotiating that, right? It's led by the city. So it's really between these two bullets, the affordable for sale and the unrestricted market rate. Anne Marie, I'm not saying you're arguing this, but unrestricted market rate is probably would feel objectionable. I don't know. That seems that's not affordable housing, right? Or right. So that up to 120, right, Anne Marie, that might be what those 16 units are with some flexibility. So can we clarify that and then put the question back to the ELAC, because I think it's how you define those and that 120% of AMI is that market rate or attainable, right? I think it's attainable, but that's what I think we're focused on. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, because if it's over unrestricted, right, Molly, if it's over that 120, I think that's a different thing. And as you say here, Willoughby's 100% affordable. So I think we want to talk about the parameters on that middle bullet, and we can get that back to everybody.
And just officially, you know, affordable is defined by the feds as 80% AMI and below. That's right. So if we're going to include this 80 to 120, which I'm not objecting to, it's both affordable and attainable. And maybe we have to talk about it differently. That's all.
That's a great point. We love it. And I think that's right. And that's how we knew we could get to for sale, right? That was the way everybody knew it had to be a little higher. So let's clarify that. We'll get that back to everybody. I think that's a great point. Jasper, can you go through that? So we'll owe that to the group and we'll send it to all of ELAC, not just the folks that are on here. Jasper, go ahead and go down. I think Molly was through. So folks, this community planning, we can come back to that. Just a few more slides. So these are some images that we wanted to show. A couple of them you have seen, these first couple. This is phase 1A. So this is senior housing, the 66 units, right, Molly? This is the number there. So kind of shows our first thing. And this is actually on second submittal of site plan. So we are concurrently working through the process. And this is really based on feedback from the city. Next slide. This then shows, and Molly, you can kind of show us where this walks through. You can see it, the outline on the blue, folks, on the right-hand side shows that street, right? It's kind of the north side of the street as it's facing there and how it engages. So I think not exactly what Christy was asking, that's the buildings below it, but it shows as it transitions to the open space and the retaining area on the east area of the site. But you get a little feel for the street character there. Next slide, Jasper. So this then, and Molly, you can talk about this. You all have done such remarkable work with the students and the charrettes that we had. This is more of that kind of community space and transit building. So Molly, walk us through this and maybe just a couple of those images. I think they've seen most of them, but some of the other material that we're drawing on for the landscaping.
Yeah, sure. I think maybe even some of the ELAC members joined that student presentation earlier this spring, but we took a lot of their research, which was mostly focused on site amenities. It was a CU Boulder course. They looked a lot at non-hostile architecture for the RTD bus stop, mural locations, just going through those images on the right. Community gardens, which we've expanded quite a bit since probably the last time you saw the site plan. And then we are including in this community building a full-sized kitchen, hoping to do some agricultural programming and food resiliency and nutrition. We are including kind of an outdoor eating space under that pergola that extends out of the building. And we hope to, I think, both City Council and this ELAC group have mentioned some youth programming or other community plan programming that would be able to utilize this space. So we'll start looking at that again closer to opening. And then we can move on to the next slides. Actually, these are hot off the press. You guys are the first people to see them. Some renderings from our landscape architects, and we've asked them to simplify just a tiny bit on a little bit of the planting, just so it's easier to maintain in the future. But this is giving you an idea of the variety of the landscape. And then I was mentioning some of the material that we'll use are pebbles in the beds or native grasses. The landscape architects have made sort of like a three-dimensional sculpture based on where they're planting bushes and tall growing grasses. And then looking at in the distance of this particular image, you can see the main RTD stop, one of the community garden beds surrounded by that little fence there, and then in the very, very distance, a playground. Next slide, please. And actually, we even got one more version more recent than this evening, but we are
this right, Molly, just for setting, this is like a drone if you're over the roundabout on the left. So I'm over peak to peak effectively.
Yeah.
Right? And so we're looking at the community gardens. On the right is that phase one senior building, and then that community space and the RTD station. So just so remarkable, that street character as it transitions there to the east from peak to peak.
Thanks, Marcus. And Karen, I see you got your hand up.
Thank you for these images, because it's looked so barren in all those other diagrams. And that last one, I was like, oh, yes. And this one, it gives it much more life. It's not just a bunch of boxes now. And I almost said something before. It just didn't look like there was going to be much in the way of landscaping. But these kind of diagrams really bring that to life. And I think that's super helpful. Those last two, this one and the last one, make me feel a lot better. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Karen, for that. That's such a good comment. And you know what's interesting, like Karen, looking at this one, we had shown that phase one plan and they look great, but you can see now the building up on the street, and right, the parking would be behind it. But you actually understand its connection, the senior building now, to these community gardens, right? Like it makes so much more life to them. Right? So I agree. Thanks very much for saying that. And I think you get to see, we may have some renderings of that playground now that you see in that community space. So we'll try to pull this in. Jasper, we may go to the next one. We'll show a couple more and then try to add some stuff to it here. This is probably, and Molly, I'm sorry, you may know this, a north-south street, more kind of right just north of that, still in phase one. Is that correct?
Yep, this is actually Canterbury Drive. So on the left, you see multifamily, and kind of in the background, it transitions to the senior building. And then on your right-hand side is we're calling them the flats. They're larger 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom units. And then kind of behind us and to the left would be the other multifamily building. So this is like in the middle of the Canterbury Drive as you're approaching the community center, kind of like in the heart of the development.
One of the true north-south streets right in the heart of the development. Go to the next one, Jasper, please. This
Hey,
is the.
can I just jump in again? Because that, this is making all the difference, showing these kind of images. That, because I was looking at the, it looked before like like all these, the duplexes and the townhouses and all the things that were really close together. You couldn't tell that there was any landscaping, and it just looked, again, barren is the way it comes to me. But that last one also, these images are making a huge difference to the way that this project is going to look. So kudos to whoever's been doing it.
Well, we love that, Karen. And I think, honestly, that's probably, I hate to use this term, but that's a more, that has housing on both sides, right, Karen? But we wanted to show kind of the landscaping at the street edge, and that shows that again. So you're right. This, Karen, probably gives everybody the aerial, right? So over Flag Drive or Flag Drive neighborhood, looking at the site, and you see the detention area and that setback. So Christy, I will point out that building there on the south side there is closer to 120th. It's kind of always been the plan, but we do have a setback from there. So that does show that accurately. And then you can see kind of the ribbon of green on the outside of the site, the 10-foot trail, and then also all of the detention area. And then, of course, more of the area we just showed. It does show, on that street we were looking at a few minutes ago, the parking behind the senior buildings. And we actually think that's really important because it transitions to that existing industrial building that's there. So that's the right transition, right, to the parking there is to that building there. So again, a really updated aerial based on our current planning.
Quick question before you move on.
Yeah.
The single family units that were around the outside, those used to be single story. What happened?
Are you saying like those, Christy, more northeast corner? Is that fair?
Everything that was on the edge was single story. Not the townhouses, but everything that was a single family unit.
So Molly,
Yeah.
those duplexes that are there, kind of where Jasper's cursor is, are you showing those as 2-story or 1-story units?
We are currently showing them as 2-story units.
And then along Emma Street as well?
Yep.
Yes. So
Well, we haven't really designed them. We've programmed them out enough to be able to, progress things forward.
Yeah,
So
but
let
the I don't know, maybe I've missed some meetings or something, but the last time I remember seeing this, right, there was this whole talk about having this sort of gradual progression so that it has a feeling of minimal impact along 120th and along Emma, was to make those houses single story.
Great. So let's not saying come back to that, but let's look at that. So this is more in conceptual form of those, because that's one of the last phases, right? Christy, that's the for sale, right? The one we're still trying to figure out. But your point is well noted. We've often talked to that we want that residential feel so it transitions to Old Town, right, Christy? I completely agree. And we'll go back to the other renderings and see if we've kind of always shown that as 1 story. So we'll focus on that in a sec. I think, Jasper, let's finish these. And then Christy, I don't know, they're not fully designed. We'd always talk about how the end units would certainly step down, right? And 1 story. I don't know if we've said 1 story across there, but let's check on that.
Yeah. And I think, if you go into Old Town, there's not a lot of 2-story houses along Emma.
Sure.
So, right,
Yep,
just talking about that transition.
Yeah, you got it.
There are plenty of 2-story houses, and a lot of the old ones are popping the top. So I have a hunch that it's an ideal to have the 1 stories, but I bet you affordability to build all this, I bet it would be hard to have enough units.
Yeah, but they've been talking about making those 1 story for 3 years, and now all of a sudden, oh, by the way, these are going to be 2-story, and it doesn't, right?
Yeah.
it's not upfront with what they said they were going to do.
Yeah, those still, I mean, just from a rendering, those are not planned out. I think Molly's probably looking. I don't think we have any of those submitted yet.
Yeah, I'm just looking at our PUD, which has been this, guiding document that kind of came off of the sketch plan. We translated sketch plan into PUD, which is what we've been talking about since April. And looking at the cross sections, and I think I think Jasper could even look at this for us, but we have a 35 foot two-story max. And our setback from the road, which is what would give you that depth between where the road and the front of the building starts, is 32, 1630,
Maybe if
is
they're
37 feet away from the road. So that's part of what's giving you, but we are through this PUD, suggesting a two-story max for that. But Christy, we don't have the design done yet. And if we look at, these cross sections, we have a porch that's only allowed to be 1 story, and then it lifts up to the 2-story max.
it's possible that they could do the foundations lower, so it's kind of half, not all the way a basement, like the ground level. It's possible that if they have to do 2-story, they might be able to do them shorter height.
Well,
I don't know.
do you have to do 2-story? I mean, you say it's not designed yet, but you go along saying, hey, these are going to be 1 story. We're going to ease into it. It's going to look really great. And then you start just throwing out renderings that are 2 stories, and which one am I supposed to go with? Because I've go, okay, that'll be fine. You'll go back to 1 story. And I feel like that is not the way it's going to go.
It's a good
Yeah.
point. It has to do with trust.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's certainly some trust there. It is about the parameters of what's allowed. So the PUD, will set the height, right? The limits, right? But Christy, you're saying, yeah, I know that's the limits, right? That's all that's in the PUD are the limits. It's not the actual design, then we go back. So we get it. You're saying, is there a way to make those as low as possible on that? So,
well, what I'm saying is there a way to keep to what you said it's going to be for the last 3 years?
Well, I don't want to be too challenging, but we have been presenting since almost a year ago this PUD, which had the height restriction. So I think maybe we're not like renegotiating on this at all. But I think we've had this, guiding document it hasn't really changed since we started. But I understand your point completely. And I'll tell you how we go about designing the unit so that there's some context to how the final shape pops out. So our architects know that one of the parameters is exactly what you've been describing, how we wanted to step up and have all of the higher density, make it feel a lot more in line with the old town that's like directly adjacent to this property. And so that's one consideration. A second consideration will be how much square footage that we can get that will provide like a livable unit. So we can't make them too little. And so, I understand where the concern from, but if we can't do the kind of first floor ground plan to make it wide enough, that is when we go up to a 2nd story. I think it's kind of a not quite satisfying answer because I can't promise they won't be 2 stories, but
so what you're
certainly.
telling me now is that what you said for the last 3 years doesn't actually mean anything.
no, I think, hey, I want to be really careful about that. I don't think that's at all what we're saying. I think
But
that
it feels that way because it feels like you are dancing around this idea of, yeah, that's what we said, but it's not what we have to do. And we're really going to do, what works best for us, regardless of what we've been saying.
no, so we're trying not to do that because we're not dancing around it. What our challenge is that there's like 3 more parameters that'll come in to shape the final size of the so sorry. So some of them may be 1 story, some of them may be 2 story. And so I think what I'm hearing you specifically is talk about those units on the northeast corner and then along Emma Street. I don't think that we've tried to say, we've always said those would be residential, right? And single family, the duplex, as we all know, that's the duplex corridor. I need to look at that other image. Maybe we've always depicted those as one story. But Christy, I think it's a completely fair comment. You're making a fair comment. I'm not arguing with you. I think we don't know that answer. If you want to stress that those should be one story, I think our challenge is probably stepping those down. I do not believe that all of them will be one story across the whole length of Emma Street.
And I want to say that our whole team, not just like me, developer, talking to you guys, our whole team, and I don't know how to prove this, our designers, our engineers, we hold to heart some of the guiding principles of ELAC and the general shape and feel. It's really important to, so the very fact that it needs to feel like a single family along that corridor is not something we're taking lightly or trying to get out of, or it's.
And it needs to feel like Old Town. That was the point all along, that it transitions into Old Town. And so especially along Emma, that was supposed to have that Old Town look. And Old Town is the little cottages. It's not big giant houses. That's some of what's happening, but we've had to put restrictions in place because of that. I don't know if you're going to be following the Old Town guidelines, but definitely Emma was sold to us as this will still be, we're going to try and mirror Old Town as much as we can, which is hard because every house in Old Town is different, but there's still a look, there's a feel that you get. And that's what we were hoping that this would happen here.
Somebody on mute but thinks they're talking.
No, but maybe we'll, I can keep going with this timeline in the interest of our time tonight. Next slide, Jasper. I think we went through this one enough already. Next slide. Just a reminder of all the things that we've been through to kind of get us to this point. And on the next slide of our future efforts, just reiterating, we did our final PUD submittal. We actually already did that, I think in September. So it shouldn't say October 13th. And then our PUD hearing is actually October 20th. Sorry, this must be an old slide. So let's not dwell on this one too much longer. But one thing I do want to mention on timeline, just to maybe Christy's point, is that of like what comes next, how do we hold you guys accountable for what you promised? Right now, we have such a heavy focus on getting these entitlements out so that we can close on this deal financially in February 1st. So that's not something that I stress to ELAC a lot, because it's this whole other side that I don't, we go on for more and more meetings about what the funding sources look like. But this project was awarded a 9% low-income housing tax credit award this year for that senior building. And as you all know, interest rates are rising. And so we made the decision to do a rate lock on our interest rate, which was a good thing because it went up again last week. So every time our building, every time the interest rate goes up, our building cost goes up. And so we'd rather spend money on the neighborhood than on interest. And so we made the commitment. And so we're locked in to close on this building on February 1st. So there's a lot of design that hasn't been done. We've done our best to kind of work through phase one, which is a tremendous amount of work for this team to do. Not just this PUD guiding principles, but all of the thought that goes behind, every little detail to this development. That really informs how it will all feel. So there's still a lot left to come. We're getting through these entitlements process, which have been going for many years now. And after this, one of our next steps will be to start on phase 2 and phase 3. And we're not going to dump ELAC by any means. Like, I think you guys are along for the whole ride, which means phases 2 and 3. So we're going to be in conversation with you for the duration of this project. Okay, questions?
I would just like to respond a little to this question about the 2-story or the 1-story. We had a number at the very beginning of 500, and then we reduced it to 400 units. And the goal here, in my mind, is to provide for the community affordable housing and to provide as much as we can within the confines of a design that looks good, feels good, matches the community in every way that we can. And one of the things we've done throughout this process is created things that took up space, a community gardens and a dog park and more green space and more walkways. And I don't know at what point those shifted from 2 to 1 or if they actually did, but it makes sense to me as we added elements that took up space that we may have to redesign the way things work in order to keep to our number. And some folks may find that too much or not appropriate, and others of us might feel that the number is important. And so, Lafayette has a goal of 12% affordable housing by 2035, and we're not very close to that goal. And so keeping the number as high as possible, in my mind, is important. But that doesn't mean I don't think that design needs to go by the wayside, or that we shouldn't take into account, how it goes and flows with Old Town. And as Karen said, there's so much different kinds of housing in Old Town. It's hard to say what it would match to, but I appreciate that we've added things to the mix that have taken up space, and that might change exactly how it ends up getting laid out.
So folks, I want to apologize. I went away, locked out, and had to reboot everything. So I actually went away and froze my computer because I went and looked at our historic image, and we are downloading that. And I want to show you the Old Town image that we have shown, which shows a 1-story and 2-story homes all along. So this is the image that we have shown. This is our original rendering and all the aerials that we have shown to City Council and Planning Commission of Emma Street. So on this view, folks, it's a little strange. Jasper, go back to that, please. This shows Emma Street there looking at the south. So we're above the property across the street, the north side of Emma Street looking down. And you can see how those are 1- and 2-story homes that are there. Doesn't change anything that was just said. We completely agree with everybody. We just know we want to work through that. So then, Jasper, if you'd go to the close-up of our Emma Street, and this is what Molly was very accurately describing that our architects will go through, is how to make the porch and the front stoop be that 1-story element, right? Really framing the street pattern of, as was accurately described by Christy and, Karen kind of transitioning into that. And then how it steps back. Some of them have that 2-story. So I just want to be really clear. This is what we've shown forever as a 2-story mix on that area. So we're not suggesting any change. I think, Christy, that you are noting I don't want to use this word, but a little bit more muscular design, right? In that new image, right? That doesn't show maybe as much articulation as this does and step down. So I think it's a really good comment, and I think it's really well noted. So we don't have them yet, but we're with you. I just want to be clear. This is not a change for what we've been saying. We are not changing direction. We're being very consistent. We think it's that 1-story frontage with a 2-story product and a mix of that along Emma Street. I do want to show you, and I'm so sorry I went away. Did you get to 120th? Because I know folks were doing great at 7:05, but Jasper, did we show any of those slides there? I don't think so. Molly, we didn't show anything on 120th. So
yes, we did. Mm-hmm.
Did you walk through these here?
No, not yet, but let me go through that quickly.
So if we can go through, and I just want to frame this, and I'll come back to that other discussion, but Christy, we really wanted to share these with you particularly and the whole group about the feedback we have gotten from the city And really the design of 120th on this image is on the right-hand side, and then Emma Street, of course, coming in, and how you see a little more curvature and a little bit of an offset, not a true 90. And a lot of that is being done because of the homes that are on Flag Drive and on 120th there, that really, so we don't line up our intersection. This is something Christy has been terrific working with us on, so it doesn't set up a T right at the intersection of their property. So I just want, these are hard, they have a lot of detail on them, but Molly, can you talk about where these are now at, these documents, and we can share them and let other people look at them as well?
Yeah, so 120th, we've been really working really closely with a lot of people because this touches a whole bunch of different things. It touches City of Lafayette open space and their potential trail project that we've been talking all along to connect basically downtown with Coal Creek Flag Drive open space. It touches County Road, it touches City Road, it touches irrigation ditches. And so we've been coordinating all those parties to provide a safe intersection that accommodates a pretty high speed. I think it's a 45 mile per hour or 40 mile per hour design speed for that 120th.
No, it's 35.
Okay, 35 mile per hour. The local road of Emma Street, and also accommodating the, I guess, facilitating the improvement of all the traffic that comes out of peak to peak twice a day during the school year. So all of those factors translates to this intersection design, which has really robust brand new drainage, including the moving of 2 culverts that are, I guess, right near your house, Christy. We're extending those to provide drainage to the north of the site. Pedestrian crossings and lighting traffic signal, which will all be new for this intersection, as well as anticipating the future trail connections provided by open space. So this is a technical drawing, a little bit hard to read, but that dark gray is basically new pavement. The curve of Emma Street, as Marcus mentioned, is to provide a safe, sight distances as cars from the north are approaching along that curved section of 120th. They have to be able to see the light. And so this curve provides basically a 90-degree connection. It avoids Christie's driveway, and also provides for turning lanes, bike lanes, and proper radiuses. So there's a lot going on here, and this is in the engineering phases. We just had a call with the city to go through their concerns with it, and we're pretty close to having this one solidified. It also requires some just input from open space, since they're anticipating a trail project there. We have to coordinate with them, so we're building something that works for them.
And Jasper,
Yeah.
I think, yeah, go ahead.
So just to clarify, this is not actually my house. I'm the one to the south.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yep.
So you talked about pedestrian connections and bike lanes, and I've still never seen anything that shows that, other than the one that you showed as a future wish list, where that basically wipes out the front yard of my neighbor's house and my house. And I contacted the Boulder County traffic people, and they were not really very familiar with this project, and said, don't worry about it, that will not happen. But it seems like that is still what you're presenting when you talk about bike lanes and sidewalks. And
yeah, let me try to find another graphic and share my screen so that you can see the striping plan. This kind of engineering drawing is showing some weird lines, so it's not as clear. So let me pull up another drawing that will show the actual striping, and you should be able to get a better sense, and it's not just yeah, you should be able to get a better sense of okay, so let me move these. Can you see this drawing here?
Get a little larger. Yes. Yep. That's great.
Okay, so on Emma Street, we have the left turn lane here. We have a bike lane that is actually continuous back to the roundabout. We're providing for the future, the city's future, because currently there are no bike lanes on this. We have the multimodal path right here, which is pedestrian and bicycle, and in most instances in our neighborhood is actually pulled away off the road. It just meets the road here. We have a crosswalk, we have a landing pad, we have, we can share all these are public, we've submitted them to the city. If you read all these little notes, it kind of gives you more details about what type of pedestrian crossing, what type of push button. So all these little notes are going into the details of how they're programmed, how many times they'll flash. And so we're anticipating this condition as well as a future condition. There's bike lanes coming north to south here. And then on this section of road, we don't have enough right of way because of the confines of where the private land is and where our neighborhood is here. And the right of way as you go past our neighborhood, farther south, south of where we've been showing, it's just a narrow road with buildings on either side. So we've worked within those constraints also. But on this side of the road, this is actually the bike path. It's pulled out of the vehicular traffic. But you would come here, and we have all these traffic reports to go through this design too, which we could share if someone wants to read through them. And then we don't know what the city wants to do over here, so we're not showing a landing pad yet, like over here. But hopefully, Open Spaces said that's a 2-year project, so it would likely be soon. And then, yeah, this is showing the new road condition that gets turned, Emma Street gets turned upward. But yeah, these are all the different lanes and things.
Molly, so just so you can show that, can you blow up 120th there, kind of the southern part of that image? And so, Christy, I know what you're talking about, and I think you and I'd agree those dash lines are potential future edge of backup curbs and right of way. So that does involve your property and other properties. That's county land, as you know, right? So that's probably through the process they have to go through. We're showing now the existing conditions and what we can plan. So 120th there that you see those 2 lanes, and then the new pavement that we're adding, those weird engineering drawings that you certainly understand that are more filling in the curvature there. So we are having to plan for 2 future connections. So if you roll up just a little bit to the north, right, Molly, that shows some of those future landing areas, Christy. So I think that's what we wanted to share this with you, get you involved in that process, because that's all that east side, right, of 120th is really what you're talking about, right? Those are, the property to the north, your property, where that ultimately goes on your right of way. So again, not us planning it, but we are showing the pedestrian connection. We're crossing Emma, right, as you see here on that to the north, and then crossing there at 120th. The reason for that is the site dimensions, right, on the curvature. So we have that to see pedestrians, and the crossing that will eventually go to the trail system, right, that will be north of your properties there as well. So the city wants to have a pedestrian crossing there because there are eventual trails that they will have on the north side of that intersection. So Christy, I know that doesn't answer all the finality of where is that right of way, but you can see where we're drawing existing road and then at least the dimensions of what we've been told the future road may be.
Okay.
Does that make sense? That I saw one of them denote, if I'm just looking at it, sorry, my speakers are covering it, but it shows future back of curb, right? I saw that one somewhere, Molly. On the east side of that image up there, it said future back of curb. So that ultimate curb and gutter, ultimate curb and gutter. So Christy, that would be at its full width. So I think this is great for you to pour into. And then what I would ask you, you certainly get is, okay, where's our existing property lines now, right? And
Right.
where is this laid over on our respective properties?
Yeah. So who would I contact to find that out?
Yep.
Right.
So-
Because I don't have this drawing. It doesn't have enough really site information on here for me to look at that.
Yeah. Why don't we share, Molly, we can share the material, right, that we've submitted, right? It's in the PUD. And then would we just identify the person at transportation, right? Is that fair, who we're working with?
Yeah,
And I think that's the best.
would be the best person who we're all kind of talking to. He's the county public works. And I think Christy, that's who you were talking to, right? Like, forgetting his last name right now.
So Jasper, can you do me a
Mike
favor?
Thomas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mike Thomas.
Yep.
So Christy, can we tee up an email with Mike Thomas and just explain that? And then we'll share that engineering drawing, Jasper, if you can go back to that, take over the screen again for Molly, if that's okay. And just show that kind of gray picture there that showed the new pavement. That's really what we're responsible for. Christy, I know that's not your question, but I'll send you this. So that darker gray is new pavement, right? It's the change of that. And then eventual lines, right? Where does it eventually go? That's your question, which is completely right. So Molly, is it okay? We can share this diagram as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that would be
Okay,
a
great.
good one.
So Christy, we'll do that. And then you and I, we can certainly have a separate conversation about it, but we understand your point. What I guess is the real change is that the Emma Street crossing is a north-south and then crossing on the north side of that intersection over to 120th.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
that's good information to have, but it still doesn't really give any information about, who. So I'll just voice my concern, right? You guys build out 100 your project,
Sure.
and then the city decides that they want a bike path and a sidewalk on my side of the road. And they go, oh, we can't possibly change our side. So we're only going to, I try to use nice language.
Yeah.
What they will do to the homeowners on the east side. When if they had just planned better now, that wouldn't even be an issue.
Yeah, I agree. And what's interesting is that the curvature of this that you and I were all looking at right now, you can see how they're in some ways pulling away from you all on the east to provide a better, true 90-degree angle there, right, for the pedestrian crossing. But Christy, your point is as it comes down, right? What's it do there? Does it arc into your properties more? And I think that's fair. What we have been told is the city is really trying to move pedestrian passage and pathways and future park things to the north of your neighborhood, right? Not really on Flag Drive, but it doesn't change that you still go to Flag Drive, right? There's side, what happens there. And obviously, but I think the good news is that's county land. So the county's got to agree as well. But let's start here, Christy. We were finally given the roadway sections and told, here's where to go. The big change for us was being told that the pedestrian crossings are across Emma on the north side of that intersection. So Christy, let's start there and kind of pull you into the conversation.
Okay. I also think, part of the discussion was, the crossing for people from the Flag neighborhood was supposed to be somehow safe for them to get to the intersection at Emma. And that they have to take our property in order to do that. And we don't want that. And, you're saying, well, let's not put in a pedestrian crossing, something safe at Flag because we're going to have this other thing when you're not really going to have this other thing.
Well, I think we are, but I think we are going to have the other thing up north. But I get your point. We've talked about, and I think Sharon, who's on, and certainly Wendy's and other, long talked about, would there be a pedestrian crossing at Flag Drive, right across that intersection? The city believes this is a much safer passage, right, instead of mid-road, if you will, right? However that gets denoted, that to bring people to the safe crossing at the intersection. But I'm with you, and so let's have this discussion. Let's get this with Mike and go through it. I think it's completely fair that you all ask, okay, great, but where are these future curbs and sidewalks on the east side? There's no doubt we have our side in, right? Christine, I'm not trying to leave you hanging out there. We're showing our side, but what happens when it lands on your side of the street?
Yeah. And the bigger picture is, you have your side, but your side is being designed
Sure.
with assumptions about what is going to happen on the east side. And I don't it doesn't seem like that's a reasonable assumption to make.
Okay, let's go have that. I mean, I think they've done the one thing that they've done that I think really helps you. I'm not saying they're not going to ask for sidewalks or pedestrian, is they put that 10-foot multi-use trail, excuse me, on our side, right? So they did put the larger, more active use on our side. But Christy, that doesn't change it, right? They're still going to have some activation, if you will, or connection there. So let's go see it. But I think that's fine. So Molly, I think this is Christy has been, very fair about this from day one. Let's maybe have a follow-up where we discuss that, right? So the engineering docs, some of this is contained in the PUD, but let's kind of go through. So Christy, we may just follow up tomorrow and see if we can set a quick call with you and go through that as well. So our engineers could also be describe it so we can kind of go into it with the city.
Okay.
That work?
Yeah, I feel like we need to have the county on that call too, though.
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
Right,
I'm not
because
trying to cut them out. Yeah.
those are the people that are, they're defending the county land. And right, the city's going to take as much as they can, and the county is the one who's going to have to push back. So
completely fair. Yep, completely fair. That's great. And this one, as you can see, I mean, sorry folks, for everybody else, this shows all the outlets, the utilities. I think, Karen, what's interesting, for something you were really involved, the property to the north, when they acquired that, the city, and the planning now about the drainage, right, Karen, some of those things are really getting addressed. But, hopefully someday, as you got such a nice condition that goes before city council, they need to focus on the sidewalks and the connections off of our site to the west of our site, right? So this does address some of the drainage issues, Karen, but not all of those pedestrian connections to the west into Old Town. Okay. Folks, we're covering like tons of material here. We're working through that. So I think I'm going to say, so we don't have more material. I think what we have is we wanted to share this as new updates. I respect everybody's comments about the 2-story. We're not pushing back on that. I just want to be sure we are being consistent with what we've always said, but we're going to go back to that and figure out what that 1-story, how that feels. So we're just going to have some trust between all of us about that. I think, Christy, if you want to make those comments, and I mean that whether it's like a city council comment, I think that's completely fair. We're going to continue to address that issue as we move through it. So other folks, Bob, I know that we had a full set of questions. We got 4 or 5 questions from the SAP. We have answers to those. Folks, it's 7:20. We can run through those real quickly and maybe take about 10 minutes, or should we email those directly, Bob, and maybe have an offline conversation? I'm good either way with that.
I could summarize, if I'm allowed, Marcus. I think your presentation really dealt with the first 4 questions that Senior Advisory Board was discussing, but going in a little bit different direction, and I'll be brief on this. There's discussion in the Senior Advisory Board looking forward to who will have access to actually living here. And we were told in the past, well, there's some guidelines, and because there's federal funds involved, it has to be open to everybody. And that was an unsettling comment or response to some of our members. But then just recently, there was talk, I can't say where it's from, that the Marshall fire victims might have access, preferential access to renting and buying at Willoughby Corner. Hearing that, it brought us back to the same question. Well, if we can give a certain group some special privileges to have access, what about residents in the city of Lafayette who actually contributed their tax dollars, about $1 million, to help buy this project? So that's one question. You'll see we're going beyond all the excellent presentation you gave, thinking now, okay, who's going to get there and how do they get there? That's part 1. And part 2 has to do with seniors, encouraging seniors who are already property owners who perhaps may want to downsize And Willoughby Corner would be a very excellent choice for them because of the visitability, just the whole layout of the community. It's really a warm, inviting, multi-aged community. And so this Boulder County Housing might pursue this. You're familiar with the senior tax exemption. People who have resided in their homes, people who are seniors residing in their home, get a percentage, I think it's 50% of their taxes eliminated. But if they were to move, downsize and move into Willoughby Corner, do they have to start all the way back to ground zero, give up the exemption that they've been enjoying over the years? Or could there not possibly be a portability factor built in to for seniors in terms of their exemption for property tax? Those are the questions that the Senior Advisory Board raised, and perhaps this is more for Boulder County Housing to say, how would this fly? Is this possible?
Yeah, it's great, Bob. Those are terrific. And just folks, I think all of you are interested. So we'll answer those quickly. The last one we'll probably need a little more additional background on, Bob. We can talk about or a little more information. Molly, will you address the Marshall Fire victims, and is their preference planned here, kind of where that's at?
No, so at one point we said that would be the only potential that I could think of was sort of a disaster relief, immediate assistance. I think at one point this year, maybe that was said. I don't know which meeting or where it was communicated, but it is very true that BCHA after the fire applied through HUD to have an exemption such that any family could move into a BCHA property. And that was to just provide immediate assistance. Willoughby will not open until 2024. And so it's very, that waiver that we got to be able to house people that were impacted by the fire was a 1-year waiver. And it, we ended up homing one family or a couple of families for that. So I think the quickest answer to that is that Marshall Fire victims do not have preference in Willoughby at this time. I think that's the easiest way to answer that. It would not be without a lot of regulatory requirements that we were able to make that happen. It's not guaranteed. And then as far as and we hear this in every community. It's not just Lafayette, but everybody who has a brand new project open up in their community. Like, of course, it makes sense that you would want to have local residents who are intending to stick around in the community get preferential treatment. We cannot do that because it's illegal from fair housing standards or fair housing regulations. But what we can do, which we've done in a number of other communities, is given, and we did this for the Senior Advisory Board, but give a tutorial on how you apply for our project and provide marketing material so that you can be like first in the queue of applicants and that you're well prepared to be able to apply. But we cannot give preferential treatment. You basically have to ask people for information that's illegal to count. It's age, sex, all of that stuff where you just cannot bias.
It's because of the funding, right? Yeah. So Bob, that unfortunately hasn't changed. I think that was a emergency situation on the Marshall fire. So I think that's the reason you heard that. So we're not prioritizing. So I think, Bob, and we'll provide an answer on that. We have kind of just a quick written response. The other one, the senior property tax exemption, right? I think that's what you're talking about is the senior property tax exemption that you apply for annually. What I don't know, Bob, is how that intersects with then affordable housing. And Marie may know that, but we'll go research that. My guess is, and I don't know this, Bob, you might know right away, is that also available for renters? I don't know that it is. So the question may be, can you get that exemption in the affordable for sale units, right? That's probably what that is, Bob. So we might refine that a little bit if you think that's the way, because I think it's probably about for sale housing. Or Karen, go right.
And I can respond to that. If you're living in an affordable unit and you've lived there 10 years it's 50% of the first 200,000 that you get a credit for.
Okay.
So all of us, no matter if your house is worth $1 million or 400,000 or whatever, it's only 50% of the first 200,000. So it's most every house in Boulder County, including these affordable housing units, would qualify for that. But
Great.
what did happen, Bob, and I can try and find the bill number and a description to share with you, is in the last legislative session, there was a lot of conversation about that very topic, which is the lack of portability and the fact that renters don't get any credit. And so the legislature created a pilot for this year, the fiscal year that'll end, at the end of 2022, for a tax relief on property taxes for seniors. And I don't remember all the criteria for how it works. And I've looked at it once or twice, but I wasn't intimately involved in it. But there is going to be some help for people who are not homeowners and haven't owned their house for 10 years this year. And then they're going to see, okay, Marcus has got it, House Bill 22-1205, and then they're going to see how expensive it is, what it ends up costing, who takes advantage of it, can they keep affording it? So that is a pilot for this year.
Yeah, Anne Marie, that's so helpful. Karen, you may have a comment, but Bob, look at that House Bill 22-1205. That's that 1 year bill, kind of the pilot as Anne Marie described. So they're getting to the very nature of your question, right? So can we get that expanded? It would be on the for sale unit. So Molly, you and I can talk about that just in general. So this is our first for sale product, right, Bob? So this is probably a question of first impression here. So thanks for that. So we'll go work on that and we'll try to understand the ramifications of this 1 year House bill as well.
Thank you so much. I'm going to be presenting it at my next Senior Advisory Board meeting tomorrow. So Anne Marie and Marcus and Molly, thank you for your comments, and I'll be relaying this back to the board members tomorrow.
Great. Thank you. Karen, I missed you. Did you have a comment?
I kind of got answered within all that. Other people said it. Thank you.
Perfect. You got it. You bet. Yeah, I called on you to answer that one for me and we got it. So folks, so Bob, we had the other 3 or 4 questions that kind of got answered from SAB. We'll send those over as well. So folks, you guys, this is great as always. I think we have a couple of things. It's kind of exciting to get to material we've been wanting to talk about, like 120th. We'll resend that. Is there any other questions that anybody has? I appreciate all the time tonight. Any other questions? Yeah.
What do you need or want anything from us? I'm actually flying on a plane that night and cannot be at the hearing, but I could write something. Is there some support that you need in preparation for the October 20th meeting?
We would greatly appreciate it. We respect kindly, all ELAC members, any ELAC members that would want to participate. Anne Marie, you are right. It's a special night. So since you're a different night, right, Thursday in City Council. So a letter would be terrific. I think it's important to just kind of focus back on the PUD and how it relates to that sketch plan, the rezoning, the full process that we've gone through. So Anne Marie, a letter would be terrific. We're happy to follow up directly with you, but a letter would be much appreciated.
Okay, I could use, if Jasper, if you want to do any specific talking points for me, I'd be happy to write a letter.
That'd be great. And if anybody else wants any comments, Karen, I have not forgotten about your first question about the notice. So that's also out there. You and I can talk tomorrow on that when I get an answer. So Karen, others, I can follow up. So anybody just let us know if you need any, any of the details about this, but we'll certainly share just in general to the ELAC when the hearing is on the 20th and how you participate in that meeting as well. Okay. All right. You all are terrific. I know it's been a great conversation tonight. Christy, I'll talk to you this week and Karen as well. So with that, I think, Molly, we've covered a lot of material. Thank you all very much, and we look forward to continuing this again Thursday the 20th, which is next Thursday. We're at City Council on the PUD and those related documents. So we'll talk to everybody then. Have a great night.
Thank you.
ELAC.
Thanks so
Good
much.
job, you guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.